Hey guys, in this video I'm going to review the Hori Mini N64 Controller. And this is a controller I've wanted for a long time and I've finally been able to get my hands on one. And there have been quite a few videos actually, reviewing this controller. It's actually a really popular alternative to the stock N64 controller. But I feel like I can offer a little bit of a unique perspective on this because I'm actually one of the few people who actually like the stock N64 controller. I know it was sort of a divisive controller for many reasons. I might actually get into that later. But yeah, basically I want to sort of showcase the controller, show what it is, how good it might be, whether you should buy it, because there are a lot of factors that come into play when it comes to, acquiring this controller. For one, you'd have to get it used off eBay or something like that. It was a Japan-only controller, so it is quite a bit expensive these days. So, we'll see if this controller's for you. All right, so to state the obvious, this pad was made by Hori, and these days you might know them as a company that makes arcade sticks and high-quality accessories for portables like screen protectors and whatnot. They work really closely with first-party manufacturers, so yeah, they put out some really top-notch stuff. So I expected really good things out of this controller when I first heard about it. When I first saw screenshots of this thing, I immediately thought of the Saturn 3D controller that was made for Nights in the Dreams. It was a great game, by the way. Just to show it right here, it looked kind of similar, but it really does, when you compare them side by side, show how small the Hori Mini is, hence the Mini in the title, the controller. But yeah, sorry, I just wanted to show that just to give you an idea of how small it is. Alright, so here I have the stock N64 controller side by side with the Hori Mini. Again, you can sort of see the size disparity between the two. It really showcases how small the Hori Mini is. So let me talk about the stock N64 controller for a second because, like I said, it's a pretty divisive controller. It had a lot of fundamental flaws in a lot of ways. So here, let me just move this out for a second. So the main problem is this. It has three prongs, left, middle, right, which is great if you're an octopus. But if you're not an octopus, it poses a lot of problems because here's how most people hold the controller. Holding the middle prong with your left hand and the right prong with your right hand. So what that means is that you don't have access to the D-pad or the L button right here. So you're out two, or actually 5 inputs, so that's kind of a big deal. But for the few games that did use the D-pad, and you have your left hand on the left prong, you don't have access to the analog stick, or really the Z button in the back of the controller. So it had a lot of flaws. It actually seems like this sort of left prong was like grafted on at the last second for third-party developers, to sort of appease them, because it was a really weird design decision on Nintendo's part. So, with that in mind, now actually let me just justify my sort of fandom of the N64 controller. Because see, while it did have those fundamental flaws, I think Nintendo really did a good job of designing their games around that limitation. So when you hold a controller like this, it pretty much made it so that you never had to use the L button or the D-pad in meaningful ways. So it was never too much of a problem. Though I would never, rank the N64 controller in the top 10 of all time or, use it for anything but N64 games. But for the games that are actually on the system, I'd say it's a really great controller. So yeah, just wanted to sort of, justify certain things about it that I liked. But yeah, so transitioning into the Hori Mini, so like I said, it sort of consolidated things to two prongs, like pretty much 95% of the controllers made. They sort of squished all the buttons together, like they're all extremely close, as you can see. This is kind of how it looks. I have a normal sized hand, so as you can see, my thumbs take up quite a bit of the the controller space wise. So if you have really big hands, I don't know if this controller is for you, but if you have normal, I'd say American-sized hands, I don't know how that translates to other countries, but it should be serviceable for you size wise. So just talking about the controller itself in terms of the changes made. Um, the Z button has been transitioned to the shoulder buttons, kind of like what they do with the Wii Pro controller these days. The Z button is they made it basically into the R2 and L2 buttons on a PS2 controller, or a DualShock rather. So that's kind of nice. It gives you two inputs and two options right there. Um, I kind of like the Z button in the back of the controller. I'll sort of get into that later when I talk about specific games and how this works with them. But yeah. Other than that, actually, let me just move this. It's kind of distracting. The start button, they made it a lot smaller. It has an eraser feel. I wouldn't be surprised if you could just take it out and like erase pencil markings or whatever. But I guess the most striking thing and the most important aspect of the Hori Mini is the analog stick. If I'm not mistaken, it's actually literally a GameCube analog stick. So, and that has a lot of sort of advantages, which I'll get into later when I talk about specific games, like I mentioned earlier. The D-pad kind of reminds me of the GameCube D-pad. It's really small, which is okay in some ways and poses some problems in other ways. The A, B, and C buttons, they're not exactly the same as the N64 buttons, but they're pretty damn similar. I have no complaints with those. They're just every bit as responsive as the stock one. So yeah, I love that. In terms of how it feels when you hold the controller, which is, in my opinion, probably the most important part of any controller, it feels great in your hands. It's made of similar plastic as the stock controller, but it's a bit softer, which is really nice. It's hard to explain, but I really like that. It has grips in the back, so it's really comfortable. I've never had any cramps with this controller. Right here, it has the slot for things like the rumble pack, the transfer pack, and the memory pack. I tried all three of those, and they work perfectly with all the games I tried, so no issues there. Basically, first-party quality stuff we have here. So, that's what's sort of given this controller that really high pedigree among hardcore N64 fans. So yeah, let's actually get into specific games. All right, so when I ordered the Hori Mini off eBay, these are the games I was most interested in trying, whether it be because they're really important games on the N64, or they have interesting, control quirks, or both. I also wanted to choose like high quality ones because these are games that the average N64 player is likely to play. Like I'm not gonna throw out like Rocket Robot on Wheels or other really weird obscure N64 games. So yeah, these 9 games, I'm going to talk a little bit about each one and how the Hori works with these, whether it's improved or slightly worse than the stock N64 controller. So yeah, let's get to it. Alright, so first we're going to start out with the all-time great Super Mario 64. To this day, I'd say I've never played a game where I feel like I have full control of a character like Super Mario 64. Just the sense of freedom you have in controlling the characters is unparalleled, even compared to modern Mario games like Sunshine and Galaxy. Well, those are great games too in their own right. I just feel like they scaled back the control inputs a little bit more. So yeah, it was really important for me to make sure that it felt right on the Hori controller, and for the most part, it feels exactly the same. I'd say the one key difference is the long jump, which is basically when Mario runs, you can press Z and then A, and then he'll sort of jump really far, hence the name long jump. It's a key jump that he uses to traverse through certain areas and just travel quickly in general, so it's really important and fun to use. So normally, like I said, the Z button is in the back of the stock N64 controller, so it's one smooth motion where you can just, press Z in the back and then A in the front. But with this controller, since the Z button's on the shoulders, you have to press Z here and then A there. So it's a little different. It's a different feel. It's something you'd have to get used to. It's not the end of the world, this difference, but I like the stock Z button better when it comes to long jumping. but not a big deal. Still feels great either way. Happy with how the analog stick controls Mario. Feels perfect, so no issues here. All right, next up is my favorite game of all time, Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. Sort of like Mario 64, controls the same for the most part, except for one key difference. Here, it's the legendary Z targeting system, which actually changed the industry, believe it or not, back in '98, because it really sort of revolutionized combat in a 3D environment. Back when that was sort of a janky and inconsistent thing in 3D games. So, like I said, several times before, Z button's in the back of the controller usually. Here, Z button is on the shoulders. So, if you want to Z target and use your shield, you have to press Z to target the enemy, and then the R button to use your shield. And then if you want to, swing your sword while you have your shield up, you press B. So it's kind of a weird, like, cat's cradle of button combinations. It's a little awkward, but in all fairness, most people don't use the shield that much outside of situations where you have to, like in the Deku Tree. So it shouldn't be a problem overall. It's just something I wanted to know because it did feel a little awkward to me. Just an aside, so every year I used to play Ocarina of Time, this version, until the 3DS version came out, and I would just play that every year instead. Going back to this version to do this video, I was in for sort of a rude awakening, which sort of killed my inner child. I was just sort of taken aback at how slow the frame rate is in general. It felt like a slideshow. It was sort of a rude awakening, and like I said, it killed me inside a bit to admit that. But the problem is that you don't want to get rid of the gold cartridge because it has exclusive stuff that isn't in any of the subsequent Ocarina of Time ports. Like, it has the Muslim chanting in the Fire Temple, which unfortunately they cut out of all future versions, and they have Ganondorf puking red blood instead of green blood. Again, they cut that out, so it hurts me a little to say, but maybe the N64 version isn't the one you want to play for the most part. You don't know how much that kills me to say, but yeah, the 3DS version is really good for the most part. So, alright, so the next game I wanted to try was Super Smash Brothers. I actually have one with a better label than this, but this is the first one I could find, so my apologies. But anyway, so this is actually, I find, a fairly big improvement compared to the stock N64 controller. Since it does have the GameCube analog stick and it has the extra shoulder buttons, it actually feels more like you're playing Melee or a modern Smash Brothers game. I always felt like the GameCube controller, or Smash Brothers was made for the GameCube controller and vice versa, so it feels more at home like that. Obviously, when you go back and play the N64 version, it's not as responsive as Melee or something like that, so it won't feel exactly the same when you when you do your precise analog inputs, but feels damn good. Definitely an improvement. Not much else to add on Smash Brothers, but yeah, definitely an improvement on the Hori Mini. All right, so here we have Starfox 64, which I feel is best used with an N64 controller in general. It was ported to the 3DS, but I don't like that version at all, just because I feel like you need the 6-button layout, in my opinion, for it to be optimal. It's weird because the N64 controller, like I said, it was fundamentally flawed in a lot of ways, but for a lot of the games that were released on the system, they're best played using the N64 button layout. Like Ocarina of Time, I know was better in my opinion compared to like the GameCube port, where the C stick was sort of janky compared to the C button and stuff like that. But yeah, so I wanted to try out Star Fox 64 for that reason. Feels really good for the most part. I'd say it's about even. Pretty much no change actually. Barrel rolls are really smooth to use. It used to be the Z button or the L button. So not much has really changed. So not much to add. Great game though. I would get it on the N64 if possible, instead of the 3DS version. Alright, so here's one of the games you've probably all been waiting for, Mario Party 1. This game was infamous for destroying hands of children around the world, because there were certain mini-games that required you to rotate the joystick with the palm of your hand. And since the N64 controller's analog stick had really hard plastic, a shell on top of the stick, it would give you really harsh blisters. Totally worth it, by the way. But that aside, so yeah, the GameCube controller analog stick, or sorry, the analog stick is a lot softer, so there shouldn't be any issue there. And that actually leads me to a couple of other points. This game was infamous for also destroying N64 controllers in general because of the rotating mini games, where the sticks would become loose fairly quickly. The N64 controller I got with my N64 back in '96 is basically busted for that reason. It's pretty much unusable now, unfortunately. And also, just rotating the stick in general would basically just grind the stick into dust because of the plastic the analog stick was made out of. So that problem isn't really here with the Hori. I mean, it'll get loose eventually, but not to the same degree. So it'll just last longer in general. That's another plus of the Hori Mini, because believe it or not, stock N64 controllers with tight sticks are actually sort of at a premium these days. They're hard to find, relatively speaking, and they cost more than you'd like to pay. So maybe the Hori Mini is a good investment for that reason alone. So yeah, I guess one thing I will add is that while I did test Mario Party and this controller is superior for Mario Party, in my opinion, I would just go back and play Mario Party 2 and 3 instead. Those are actually better games, so kind of a non-issue there. Though Mario Party 1 does have its charm because of how punishing it was. In addition to just being physically punishing, with the rotating stick mini games, it was actually sort of mentally punishing because it would actually take away coins if you lost certain mini games. So that was kind of brutal, and definitely favored winners more. So it was kind of hilarious. But yeah, Mario Party 1, kind of a fun relic to look back on. All right, so I'll just talk about these three games at once because I tested them all for the same reason, just to test the D-pad, how effective that is in N64 games. Here I have Kirby 64, Pokemon Stadium 2, and Pokemon Puzzle League. So let's talk about the D-pad because I sort of skipped over it a little bit, in the previous segment. But so the D-pad is really small, like you'd imagine. So I wanted to test out if that would be an issue. Also, another thing I was worried about is that since the D-pad is so close to the A and B buttons, how it would affect gameplay, if it would sort of interfere with other elements. So I tested it out. At first, it sort of does what you're worried it would do. Your fingers sort of interject, and your fingers end up touching each other, which is really distracting and annoying. Just based on the way you normally hold a controller, you put your whole thumb over the A and B, put your thumb over this D-pad, so it's really weird and obnoxious. But I found that once you play more, your thumb sort of subconsciously learn their boundaries, and you sort of start playing this way. So they never actually touch once you get used to it. So that was sort of a non-issue after a while. Again, this is sort of a your mileage may vary thing depending on how big your thumbs are, I guess. But for me, it was fine. So yeah, Kirby 64, it's a 2D platformer, but it's not that fast-paced. It was sort of infamously slow in its day. So, there aren't really too many fine movements where the small size of the D-pad really, gets cumbersome. It definitely does the job. It's better than I thought it would be. Pokemon Stadium 2, not really much to add. Nothing sort of stuck out there. It's a turn-based battling game with a few mini games and menus, so not too much to add. I just wanted to throw in Pokemon Stadium 2 because it's an awesome game and I felt like playing it. So go buy that because I feel like a lot of people skipped over it. But even for lapsed Pokemon fans, like I sort of am, Pokemon Stadium 2, all-time great game that people don't talk about today for whatever reason. But Pokemon Puzzle League, another all-time great. Pokemon spin-offs used to be great back in the day. Pokemon Snap, which unfortunately isn't in this video, is another great game. But Continuing, so I'm not that good at Pokemon Puzzle League, so I'm not one of those people who can like really quickly, um, zip across the screen, do all these crazy combos. So I don't I it's hard to say how precise and smooth the D-pad inputs are for intensive games like these. But for me, it was fine, so I had no complaints there. I'd say for Puzzle League, you might want to stick with the stock N64 controller just because the D-pad is bigger, therefore easier to do finer movements. Like when you press down, you're not going to press right on accident, stuff like that. But yeah, overall, the D-pad exceeded my expectation. I thought it would sort of be like this lame duck thing, when I saw the pictures, but they're serviceable, or it's serviceable rather. All right, so the final game I looked at was Perfect Dark. In my opinion, the best first-person shooter on the N64, and definitely wanted to try a first-person shooter just because there were quite a lot of them on the N64. It felt exactly the same to me, so no complaints there. Not too much to add other than that I really like Perfect Dark, and it's a really technically impressive game on the N64. Though I really do like the Xbox 360 port too. That's probably a better version actually. So, but yeah, that's about it as far as specific games go. I could have reviewed more games, but I feel like I would just be, getting redundant because, a lot of those games control fairly, responsively and effectively on the Hori Mini. So just wanted to try these specific games because, like I said, they have control quirks I wanted to, test for myself. So yeah, hope that was useful for you in case you want to try these games out. All right, so that basically concludes the review for the Hori Mini. I hope it gave you a better idea of whether it's the right controller for you or not. I wish the controller came out here and was a bit cheaper. If it was, I'd actually get more than one. But yeah, pretty happy with it. And when I play Mario Party 1, I'll be using this controller and giving my friends and enemies the stock N64 controller. So yeah, they'll suffer while I won't. And with that sort of sadistic aside, thanks for watching, and hopefully I will make more videos soon. Sort of running out of ideas, but we'll see. All right, guys, take care.